Welcome back to our third interview in the Fight for Equality series here at Project Revolution. And our guest today is the Executive Director of the Westside Justice Center, Ms. Tanya Woods. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just to kick things off, can you talk a little bit about what the mission of the Westside Justice Center is and what your role is within the organization?
Certainly. The mission essentially is to provide free legal counseling to people who are in the greatest of need. So think about marginalized communities, low income, low education, historically communities of color who don't have access to high quality legal services, but also to provide legal education and information and advocacy to those same communities so that people, before they need direct services, are equipped with information that allows them to access systems that are often very opaque and can be quite inaccessible and fraught with all sorts of obstacles and challenges. So that's what we do, focusing on our attention primarily, obviously, on justice systems, but recognizing that all forms of justice are not only found in courtrooms and in typically legal environments, but just systems generally.
That's amazing. So what do you think is the biggest problem affecting people's lack of access to financial opportunities in these communities? And how does the organization work to combat those issues?
Sure, that's a great question. As executive director, I've had a previous experience, obviously being an attorney, but also in other walks of life, and recognizing that there's a lot of privilege that goes along with living in a certain community, having a certain education, things that we take for granted every day. And when we have the tools to be able to navigate those systems, then we usually get what we want. But then there are often hidden obstacles and challenges and forces that are at work, which given today's times, we're seeing a lot of that played out on a much more mainstream and international stage, much more and in different ways than we ever have before in the past. But oftentimes people who don't have that level of privilege, when you take away race, class, gender, and any number of things that we all take for granted that give us access, then people find themselves not only being unfairly and unduly burdened by those systems, but then they are often traumatized by those same systems. And then we ask people to kind of relive those same traumas over and over again as we try to help them. And so at the Westside Justice Center, we've tried to take a different approach by treating people's matters as just that, but addressing people as whole, entire human beings, recognizing that while they may come into us seeking legal services, they may have social services or medical needs or other things. And rather than shuttle people around very highly bureaucratic systems in a way that can be very impersonal and undignified, we try to shepherd them through many of these, mazes of challenges and obstacles in a way that restores their dignity, but also gives them a sense that they are co-authors in their own success, and that much of what they need to successfully navigate a matter they probably already know, but they need an advocate or a companion or someone that believes in them, and someone that's not going to re-traumatize them as they seek redress or justice. And so that's our approach, which we think is very different. The other thing is that we are community-based. And why that's important is because people trust the people who look like them, who come from communities like theirs, who have walked some of the same paths and same neighborhoods. And so for us, it is actually ingrained in our mission that we are community-based, so that we have service providers and attorneys and community navigators that look like the people that they have as clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that for a country that preaches equality under law, the justice system is very classist. It depends a lot about like how much money you have, whether or not you are a victim of implicit biases by a jury. There are a lot of factors that go into whether or not someone is given the verdict of guilty or if someone is fined a certain amount. And to say unequivocally that that America has a system that truly is equal for everyone, I think is false and also dangerous, because it doesn't account for the historical transgressions taken against numerous marginalized communities in the past. So the work that the Westside Justice Center is doing is absolutely incredible, and it does kind of aid in repairing those historical transgressions.
And I appreciate that recognition that we are talking about a national issue. It's just not Chicago, but I encourage us to think beyond those lines and recognize that racism in itself is an international, it's a global, it's a human rights issue, right? So we now know, because there's information and there's new bodies of work that we can analyze differently than what we probably were taught. And not you guys, because you're way younger than I am, but folks that are my age that are sitting in positions of power and influence are being forced to reckon with that erroneous history about the difference between races and the difference between people. And for so long, so much of the vestiges of colonialism and historic racism that's been wreaking havoc across the human race, across the globe for centuries, right? We're now having to reckon with that, and not only addressing issues of classism, but racism and ageism, and recognizing that these are all social constructs that were made up by people who don't look like you or I, in order to preserve the hegemony and power structure that allowed a very few people on the planet to become more powerful and more, richer on the backs of other folks. And so now we're at a point where we have to reckon with that erroneous storytelling and retell the stories and put the science with it, and then hold people accountable for, the institutional oppression that is, still being combated every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were researching the Westside Justice Center, we looked into a little bit about the programs that you guys actually offer and the kind of initiatives that you're running. So could you talk a little bit more about Project Homecoming and the Community Advocates Project?
Oh, that's some of my favorite stuff, right? So Project Homecoming is a wonderful program that's funded by the city of Chicago. It was originally planned as a reentry program, and we refer to citizens who've been previously incarcerated and come back after serving time as reentering citizens. That has been called lots of different things in the past. Sometimes it was called, returning felons, or or even sometimes they were called, as people were coming back. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, as people were coming back. But then what we realized is that, a lot of folks were not being restored to the full citizenship that they had previously enjoyed before they were incarcerated. In some states, you still can't vote. In other places, if you have a certain kind of record, you can't get a certain professional license. And so after a person has been convicted of a crime, served their time, they still find themselves coming back to, oftentimes not being allowed to come back to their communities because of the restrictions placed on people that say you have to register if you're this kind of crime or that kind of crime, or you can't live with a loved one if they are getting certain kinds of government assistance for housing because they can't have a felon in their home. So there are all sorts of restrictions that are placed on people even after they've paid their debt to society that prevent them from fully re-engaging in their communities and making a living and just living a full life like the rest of us, right? So Project Homecoming is one of the reentry programs that's funded by the city of Chicago. But what we realize is that we are very different than other reentering programs. As the Westside Justice Center is very different in that we don't just merely try to refer people to where they can go get housing or refer people to where they can go get a job, although those are the two first things that a person getting out of prison has to think about. What we try to do is to also, again, in the Westside Justice Center way, is look at the whole entire human being and what do they need in order to kind of put life back together in a new way, their new normal, as it were. And so that may include a myriad of legal issues that have been entangled while they were incarcerated. They might have a custody issue. They might have lost a loved one and find themselves in the middle of a probate issue. Their car might have been towed and now they've got to wrangle with the municipality about getting their car out of a pound. And so these are all collateral consequences that happen. And we even don't, like to use the word collateral consequences because it kind of sterilizes what people are going through. But Project Homecoming is an attempt to provide resources to individuals who find themselves impacted by incarceration and violence and trauma. in such a way that maybe they have not in the past before. So we are a unique program in that regard, and we're trying to find others who are like us and build networks so that as people come back, we recognize that we're not just addressing an individual, but we are trying to help people restore their families and then ultimately their communities.
That really is incredible. I know when we were doing some research about voter oppression, one of those things that came up was convicted felons not being able to vote. So that thank you for bringing that up, because I know a lot of us, especially like high schoolers, we're not really aware of the systems that people go through after they get convicted.
And why would you, right? You know, I'm an attorney and I work in this area, but there are other attorneys who don't work in this area and they don't often know. There are regular citizens that don't know. And so when individuals are asked to go to the ballot box, to the polls and cast a ballot for an elected official, there are so many issues that they have no idea that when they cast their vote for one person or another, how that's going to impact the quality of life of somebody that they don't even know. And then ultimately their quality of life. Because let's face it, if I'm coming back and I can't get a professional license to be a barber or a cosmetologist, if I come back and I can't get a loan for a mortgage, if I come back and, you know, because I'm a convicted felon, I saw a newspaper article the other day, and someone who was convicted of a crime purchased some vacant lots in their old community from the Cook County Land Bank, which attempts to buy up distressed land and sell it, fix it up, and then sell it back to people who want to stay in the community or reinvest in the community. And there was a big like smear article about this person for what I could not figure out. I said, you know, to myself, this is a person who's paid their debt to society. They had some money. And, you know, because they were previously convicted of being a drug felon, does that mean that they're barred from then taking whatever resources they have to buy up vacant lots, prevent plight and despair, and then try to rejuvenate their own community? I mean, is that what we're saying? So, but yet and still we allow conglomerates and multinationals to buy up land and property and open up whatever they want to open up in our communities and have no intention on reinvesting, let alone living there, right? So, you know, this is one small program that allows people to engage in a way that makes a difference in the lives of others. We have an outstanding resource fair that we do a couple of times a year that we have to reimagine in this sheltering in place, where, you know, we provide people with free haircuts and headshots and, you know, help with building a resume, things that nobody's going to do or help folks with because they don't even think about it as being a need. But think about all the pictures you've taken, right, that we've got on social media, but you can't put that up on your LinkedIn profile, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's those small things that, you know, we try to fill in the gaps with that program. And then our other program is called the Community Advocates Program. And that's a system navigation program. And what we found is that there are lots of other community-based organizations and legal aid clinics that do something very similar. There might be one or few people on staff that are probably community members that have had various interactions with some of the systems that we're talking about, either the justice system or, you know, trying to get entitlement benefits, things like Social Security or unemployment. And they've amassed a certain amount of skill in that area just by kind of helping others or themselves. But what would it look like if, you know, they actually got some skills from other attorneys or other experts, put that together with, you know, their kind of just grit and know-how, and then formalize that in such a way that they can help others, right? So it's our way of repowering communities by using the skills that already exist via the people that already live in those communities, right? And so we found that there are lots of other organizations that are doing the same thing. And so we're trying to uplift and elevate that work as well, to the extent that the Westside Justice Center, along with the Resurrection Project, the two program administrators for a statewide program called Illinois Access to Justice, have been able to give away over $8 or $9 million in grants to community-based organizations like ours who provide legal services and community navigation services. And what that means is that now we are developing a network or a cohort, if you will, of agencies that, have the same or similar mission statements, that are invested in the community and look to repower communities and not just, kind of sit in your ivory tower and impart knowledge, but really begin to invest, because we recognize that communities can take care of each other if only given a chance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do kind of see what you're talking about when you think when you're saying a lot of people perform activism in a very like on an ivory chair. A lot of people in our community, especially, kind of look at activism as this like hypothetical situation because we're very detached from what the situation is. And
Exactly.
that is because we are very, very privileged and we don't really understand what it is like to be in that situation. So kind of connecting with organizations that are on the front lines, that are doing that work with the people that they're advocating for, that is really what we're trying to do here.
Right. I mean, and privilege is not something that has to be apologized for. It just needs to be recognized that there's a certain amount of individual agency and as well as institutional agency that's happening behind the scenes, that is kind of flipping the levers and turning the dials, if you will, in our society. And so oftentimes you hear people who are from a place of privilege, especially, white and male and, affluent. Well, I didn't ask to be here, or, my family, they weren't slave owners, as if that somehow erases your personal responsibility or somehow or another, makes your privilege less, less at play, if you will, right? All of those things are still at play. You can't take away your privilege any more than I can take away people discriminating against me because I'm a woman and Black, right? But we have to recognize that all of these things are at play. They are, shaping our world as we walk through it. And it's that awareness that is so desperately needed. And then once we become aware, then figuring out ways that then we can, use our privilege and our agency to not harm others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference between saying I'm not a bigot and I'm not racist to actively being anti-racist.
Yeah, and I think in the last couple of months, a lot of people have learned the difference between those two and are actively trying to become more and more anti-racist in their own lives, which is amazing to see.
Absolutely. Yep.
That kind of leads us into our next question. But how have the recent events, the past few months, contributed to the efforts of the Westside Justice Center, and what kind of impact has it made?
Well, so imagine if you were an athlete and you'd been, training for a while, and they tell you get to go to the Olympics. It's kind of like, it's the Olympics for us lawyers who do this work, right? Like, we've been waiting for this moment where we have so many cases we don't know what to do with. We've been waiting for the moment where people are just donating money just because they want to do the right thing. So it's the perfect storm in a lot of ways, but not to make light of the the abuse and the discrimination that people are, and the trauma and the violence that people are enduring. So while as an attorney, it's similar to, a trauma doctor or an ER doctor, when there's a car accident, 5-car pileup rather, you get to exercise all of your skills, right? That have probably been lying dormant, or you don't get an opportunity to exercise as much. You now actually have one case after another that you can, begin to perfect your arguments in front of a judge, right? So from that perspective, as an attorney, it's a moment at which we can all who do this work feel very proud, because we get to stand up and be the advocates that we had trained to be. From the Westside Justice Center perspective as an organization, being in the midst of a pandemic has presented some unique challenges, right? So we don't see our clients in the same way that we did before. But this is the work that, we, do every day. So it's, people are losing their homes. They're being kicked out of their apartments, and they can't afford to pay their rent, right? So we have to figure out, while at the same time, companies have to make money and mom and pop landlords still have to pay their mortgage. How do we redistribute resources in such a way that's fair and equitable, that everybody gets a roof over their head, and is not out on the streets because of this disastrous, pandemic that has plagued the entire planet. So we see a lot of, we're, starting to work on a lot of housing issues. People, unfortunately, are dying, right, rapidly. We now know, which, African Americans and Latinos knew all along, that our communities are being hardest hit by the deaths, COVID-19 related deaths, right? So what does that mean? That means there's a lot of people out there that need, probate assistance or real estate assistance because there are wills and trusts that were never drafted, or there's property that's being left behind, or children that are being left behind or shuffled around, or adults that were being cared for that no longer have a guardian. So these are all of the things that the Westside Justice Center has been doing all along that now we're just doing in greater numbers.
Yeah, I think it is very, very hard to see. Like in the last couple of months, we've seen a very great exemplification of the discrimination that goes on in our housing, in our healthcare, in our criminal justice system, purely because all of those systems are being exploited right now as a result of the pandemic. And other kind of like civil unrest that's going on in our country right now. So yeah, it is very interesting to see. And so here, leading into our another question, what is the most fulfilling experience you've had while leading the Westside Justice Center or simply working in the organization? And what do you think that these experiences should show individuals that may be more detached from the issues faced in these communities?
So probably to date, my most impactful client was a woman who was in her late 80s. And she lived in a 2-flat building on the west side that had become distressed to the point that the city had come and written her up the equivalent of some tickets for, your property being a hazard to others. And she came in saying like, there's no way I can fix this stuff. Can you kind of, help me out? So I let her know what her remedies were. And at the time she had a great granddaughter and her great granddaughter's children living with her. And there were 2 kids. And so, I didn't hear from her for a while. The next time she came in was several months, maybe a year later. And now those tickets, if you don't take care of those fines, then it escalates into a court case. So you go from now just having these fines and tickets to now you actually have a lawsuit, a complaint that's been filed against you by the city of Chicago. So she goes, I wasn't able to fix it. I really need help now. And I said, well, your remedies are still similar, but now you're going to need a lawyer, right? So we took her on her case. There was no way that she was going to be able to make the repairs and keep the building. So we were able to, one, provide direct services while she was in building court. Then 2, she needed to sell her property and then find another place. So we had resources at the Westside Justice Center to help her with that as well. Then her kith and kin that were living with her, they needed some assistance as well as far as finding work. So we tried to help with that as well. Got the whole family relocated. They found an apartment, sold their property, was able to actually get her a couple of dollars in refunds and taxes that she, some tax breaks that she was owed by being a senior citizen. Worked with the family then in trying to open an estate in probate court. So I think you can kind of see where this is all going, right? Somebody comes in with one issue. It's kind of like going to the doctor and you complain of a cough and then they notice that you have a rash and then they notice that you also have a fever, right? So that's usually how people walk in the door, right? They know about the immediate issue that's facing them, but then there's a myriad of issues that are in the background. And so we try our very best to address as many of those issues as possible. So the end of the story, as it were, is that they did move, opened up the estate, and then she finally passed away. But she saw her death coming. She began to talk to us about what she wanted to wear, what she wanted to be buried in, who she wanted to see before she passed on. And I, along with her family members, were some of the last to see her alive. And then her great-grandchildren and their families, they moved and went on happily with their lives. We still have a probate matter that we're still dealing with, right, with the rest of the family. long after she's passed. The number of, billable hours we wouldn't even begin to be able to think about a person in her situation paying, right? Let alone all of the other matters that were non-legal that contributed to her success and her being able to actually pass on with some peace, right? So that's like probably my favorite story to date. I still keep in touch with the family because of the open probate case. The woman had a sister who I call auntie. And I think we share a common cultural reference when there are people in our families that are not necessarily related to us by DNA, at least not immediately.
Yeah.
And you pick up new folks, along the way that become part of your family. And so that still to date is my favorite story.
That is truly incredible. So we're gonna kind of shift gears and take it to more of a community-based thing. So how can people in our community help out with the work that you're doing, or just help combat the injustices in our societies in general?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot, especially now, people want to know what can they do. So what we're really talking about is engagement, right? How do you get communities engaged with organizations like ours that actually make a difference? And so right now during the pandemic, probably one of the greatest challenges is outreach, because we're not passing out flyers on the streets like we used to. People are not coming into the office for Know Your Rights workshops like we used to. We don't have resource fairs and community events in the same way like we used to. But if people want to get engaged, we still do things like, phone banking, making phone calls and soliciting donations. We still have a huge need for talent as far as social media, marketing. Those are skills right now that are in high demand by so many not-for-profits and community-based organizations, because it's usually not budgeted. So if you're a professional out there that has marketing and communication skills or social media skills, go donate those to somebody. They need you badly. Answering the phones are ringing off the hook, as well as answering, correspondence through the website. So having volunteers be able to man the telephones and field, inquiries that come to us digitally, either through social media or through our website. Those are a huge need. Folks are doing virtual fundraisers now, right? Because we can't get together. So if you have a skill in event planning or resources, it's all virtual. So if you've got resources or talents in the digital audio, filming arena, that's I just got a quote to do a couple of commercials, like 30-second spots. I mean, those are 5-digit expenses that small organizations or not-for-profits don't have budgets for. But there might be an editor out there or a filmmaker out there that would be willing to donate 10 hours of their time, which could save an organization thousands of dollars to help them put together a high quality virtual fundraiser, for instance. So there are so many ways I could enumerate how people can get engaged and use their professional services to help organizations like the Westside Justice Center. Corporate giving right now is I won't say at an all-time high, but definitely has changed, because corporations want to be good corporate citizens. So if you work at a corporation, solicit your corporation to make a donation. A 5-figure donation is, will pay for some of the things that I just talked about, right? It might, cover payroll for a 2-week period for an organization my size, right? But those are small ways that, organizations, people who work at those companies could say to their company, hey, I know that Westside Justice Center is not on your short list, but, would you be willing to consider, and what paperwork do I need to fill out, right, on behalf? So there are countless ways. We do a lot of direct mailing now. We're really putting a lot of effort into making sure the community is safe and protected against the spread of COVID. And so we've done a couple of giveaways of PPE just out on the streets, but that all costs as well, right? Just even trying to get mass quantities of gloves and masks and, hand sanitizer. And we even include in our PPE kits, soap, bar soap, individually wrapped like you would find at a hotel, just to have people who might be in transition, that don't have access to clean water or to regular water, that where they can find it, that, they're able to, you know, maintain the way that we all have to interact with each other these days. So that's just a few of the ways that I, try to share with people that you can give back.
We'll try our best to kind of spread the word, and
We appreciate it so much.
and hopefully we can get you someone that is willing to do any number of things that you were asking.
Well, just
Because
you guys taking the time to learn more about what we do is I'm very humbled by the opportunity.
well, thank you very much for being here, taking time out of your busy schedule to kind of have a conversation with us. It really is important to the dialogue that I think we need to be fostering in our communities.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And congratulations on the great work that you young folks are doing. It's very trite for us to say that, but you guys are our future. I'm sure I'll be working for one of you one day. And so the work that you're doing now is very critical to our success as a human race.
Thank you so much. Really.
And thank you. And good luck. And
Thank
keep in
you.
touch with us. Let us know what you guys are up to. We can certainly, share about the work that you guys are doing on our digital presence as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.